right. So, open source. This is a question I get a lot when I talk to people. Everybody's always wondering, how do I get into open source? How do I become an open source contributor, right? And I think the thing about it is it's actually not that difficult. Contributing to open source is pretty easy, and there's so many different amazing ways to do so. So this is my talk today. It's going to be talking about contributing to open source and just a quick little guide to help you along your way to make sure that hopefully you can be successful along your journey. But again, I hope you, after this talk, really feel like, man, you know what? I could do this too, because we need more contributors out there. So thank you so much for the introduction earlier. But, my name is Tracy. You can follow me on Twitter at LadyLeet. First and foremost, I'm CEO of this.labs. And then, I do all the other fun stuff. But my day job is really fun because we get to work with a lot of really cool clients and a lot of really fun projects. So this is how I make friends. People hop into my inbox. We're 100% remote. And I love that. And also worldwide. So if you love any of these technologies or just want to hang out and chat, we are hiring engineers and engineering managers as well. So yes, come make friends with me. Okay, so first off, I'm going to just go through my journey and talk a little bit about, how I got into open source. Then we'll talk about you, and we'll talk about why do you want to get into open source, right? Like a lot of people say they want to do something, but they don't understand why. And then we'll talk about how, based on, what your goals are. And then we'll simply go into some do's and don'ts to consider as you start your journey in open source. Okay, so let's go ahead and start off with mine. Well, a few years ago, I decided to do a boot camp. And I just decided to join the community. So open source is really amazing because, Twitter actually is really amazing because you can just hop in and find people and start talking to them. And all of a sudden they become your friends. And all of a sudden it's like 7 or 8 years later and you're still friends with them. And you're like, wow, this was really cool, right? So that's what I did. I just joined the JavaScript community, right? And as you know, again, I'm on the RxJS core team, a Google developer expert, and a Microsoft MVP. And the way I started was just talking to people, seeing what was going on, seeing what people cared about, seeing who was speaking at conferences I care about, and what conferences were going on, and got to know people. As I was doing that, then I really started to sharing my experience and educating as I could as I was learning, right? I still remember during my coding boot camp, I decided that I was going to, update my blog every single day as I was going through this journey and share something new I built. So when I found the marquee tag, I just made this little Ember.js Tomster scroll back and forth with a marquee tag. And I was so proud of myself. Then I found the blink tag and that was amazing, right? So I just shared everything about my journey, no matter how silly other people might have thought it was. I didn't care, right? I just did. So it's the same thing when I started getting into other technologies, right? When I started getting into Angular, I was like, oh, Angular Material, so great. It was an alpha at the time. Angular CLI was just coming out. I was so excited about it. I really wanted to share with people how to use it. At that point in time, there was so much configuration that you needed to do to actually get the stuff to work because again, they were very alpha-ish type products. But this really helped the community understand that I was interested. I was interested in the things that they were interested in. And again, I was able to give back in my own way, right? Even as a beginner, people were having a lot of trouble figuring out how to use Angular Material and all the different components. And that helped me become a valued member of the community. Then the third thing I did was just meet people, right? Get to know people, hang out with people. Going to a conference like this and, hanging out in the comments section, for example, is a great way to just get to know people, right? It's kind of like a friendly face here and there. Same thing with Twitter. That's what I did. I just, met people, whether it was online, at meetups, at conferences, and, I just wanted to hang out, right? I had no agenda. So I would encourage you to just be nice, friendly, and helpful, and then the rest will come. So the last thing, of course, is obviously making contributions. And while I was able to make contributions like on blogs, answering people's questions on Twitter and stuff like that, I always knew I wanted to like do more and be more, right? So I kept on the lookout, and I was really good friends with the RxJS core team already. And this was at the time when they really, really needed a docs overhaul badly. And they were struggling. And I said, hey, I'm actually really good at this, right? So it wasn't my technical contributions to the RxJS core team that like helped, right? It was just my ability to organize people. So, I created a repo, I created a docs repo, I spun up like an empty Angular project. When I was talking about RxJS at different conferences, I said, hey, we're starting up a docs team, message me and let me know. And then I just, kind of this homegrown team came about. And then all of a sudden our documentation was done and it was amazing. So shortly after that, the RxJS core team said, hey, why don't you join? Right? Which is awesome. I definitely don't think you should expect this to, just start contributing and then become a part of a core team. But it is very much the case that if you do start contributing and you are, helpful and you do just spend the time, amazing things could happen, right? Some people say it's a blessing, some people say it's a curse. But you look at Mark Erickson, for example, from Redux, he started hanging out. I don't remember who was really maintaining the repo at the time, but it started off with Dan Abramov, of course. If you all might know him from the Angular or from the React community, and then like all of a sudden, Mark Erickson is like the maintainer of Redux. And when you think Redux now, you think Mark Erickson, right? So just putting in that love and that passion that you have and that energy into open source really, again, like helps you get involved if, again, that is your goal, right? So hopefully that helped you understand my journey and just, again, how easy it can be for you to provide value and contribute in ways that you didn't think were possible. I mean, the world is your oyster. I think that is the one thing I really learned when I joined Twitter. You kind of have this world around you, right? Like your physical world and the people you can hang out with and the people you meet, etc. And then all of a sudden, you have something like Twitter and a gigantic tech community, and the world is huge. Like you have friends everywhere and you can do anything and opportunities are open to you, right? So I would highly, again, encourage you all to just start getting involved. You never know, right? So when we talk about your journey and why you want to get involved in open source, the first thing to ask yourself is, what are you doing? Are you doing this for functional reasons or are you doing this for aspirational reasons? Both paths are definitely awesome. And I'll just talk about functional versus aspirational. So there's a ton of people out in the world who use technologies like React, Angular, RxJS, etc. At work, right? And they need to work on a project. Like, for example, let's just take Angular for an example. Like maybe you're working on it at work and you need something to work for some reason, or you're like waiting for something to drop, right? Or you need performance of Angular to be better. That is probably going to force you, in a sense, to have to work with Angular open source contributors generally, because you might need to fix something that doesn't work for you. So those are very functional goals, right? And functional goals of contributing to open source are totally awesome and fine. And that's where a lot of people find themselves. But another really great way and reason why to get involved in open source is to build your career, get new jobs, increase your knowledge within the technology, right? And these are very aspirational goals. So both of these paths are very awesome, but how you approach them might be a little bit different, right? Again, based on your goals. So I would say if we talk about functional, right, you need to fix something that's not working for you. Just like if you know that this is going to happen in the future, Your life is going to be a lot easier if you start contributing now, right? For ArcsJS, if I know you and you ping me on Twitter and you say, hey, I have this PR up, what do you think? Or, hey, I'm not getting a response from somebody, can you help? And we've already started establishing a relationship, I'm probably going to be more likely to want to help you. Versus if I don't know you at all and you approach me, I may or may not have time for you, right? Like it just kind of depends. I'm less motivated though. So, but if you've done something like really help me with documentation on ArcsJS, I'm going to be like, oh yeah, of course I'm going to help you immediately, right? So make sure you give before you ask. I think another really interesting thing to consider is submit an issue first and ask for feedback. Like we all want things to change with the technologies we're using. But there might be a reason why the team has not implemented it yet. So whether it's a really small change or whether it's big functionality, like definitely make sure to ask for feedback first. You can do this by submitting an issue and then finding a maintainer to champion it, and that will help you not waste a ton of your time. Like if you, for some reason, think ArcsJS shouldn't be in TypeScript and you convert everything to not TypeScript and you spend months doing that, expecting this PR to be merged, it's probably not going to be a good use of your time and you're going to be really disappointed in the end. Even small things like, for example, Road to ArcsJS 8. Even as a core team member, I said, hey, this is really hard to find because it's buried in the issues. Can I just add it to the README, right? And it's one small little link, but, I asked before I did it and they were like, yeah, of course, go ahead. And I said, okay. And then, my PR was merged pretty immediately, right? So make sure you're, again, asking for feedback first. Another thing is finding maintainers in other forums, right? GitHub is so noisy. Like I have most of my GitHub notifications completely turned off because otherwise my inbox would be completely unmanageable. But building relationships and reaching out to maintainers in other forums, right? Or emailing them if you need a response. If you send a nice personal message, it's a really easy way to get an answer than GitHub. Like I'll give you a fun example. This one time I really wanted to reach out to somebody and I needed some help. And I saw on Twitter that they were eating brown rice sushi. And so I sent them an email and said, hey, where'd you get your brown rice sushi from? Was that from Whole Foods? And then, then I asked them whatever. And they responded to me and we kind of bonded over brown rice sushi. Like it's the silliest thing ever, right? But again, that's how relationships are created and built, right? So, be human and that's okay. Definitely also, when you are pinging maintainers though in other forums, don't get impatient or feel like you're entitled to a response. People are really busy and you are just not their top priority. But again, if you want to increase your chances of being a top priority, then go back to number one, which is give before you ask. The last tip again on the how of approaching things from a functional perspective is just making sure you're building genuine relationships. Nobody likes to be used or feel like they're used or feel like you're trying to self-serve your own needs, right? This is just like any normal relationship out there, right? Like people know when you're being genuine and when you're not, and they'll remember that. So remember that, most people doing open source, they're doing it mostly for free, right? And doing it for a lot of the good of the community. So kind of try to stay in that vein. So now let's go to aspirational. I love this because this is so flexible. You can just do whatever you want. You can just do and be anything you want. That is the beautiful thing about open source and any drive that you might have, right? So the best thing about your aspirational goals, though, is that you're not stuck to a specific technology because you're using it for work. You can choose what team you want to join. So I think when you're going and you're saying hey, what do I want to contribute to, right? You should be going to the different projects and asking yourself, are there things in here that I can contribute? Look at the issues, right? See if there's anything. Are there issues you can tackle right now? Have you used the library before? Is there documentation that you can help improve, right? I think also asking yourself, do I even like these people? You can read a lot of based on people. If you look at the RFCs, the PRs, the comments, the responses in the issues, people's Twitter, can you see yourself working with them? And if it's a no, then that is completely fine. You can go find something else. There are tons of teams out there and tons of various cultures out there, and you will find your fit. I mean, if you even just look at Vue, Node, Angular, and React, these are such different communities, and how they interact with each other and their value system is, same in a lot of ways, but also very different in a lot of ways. So again, the world is your oyster. Number 2 kind of goes with similar to what I was talking about before, which is like this idea of solving problems that are wanted. So again, you might think a problem is relevant within a project, but the core team typically has, weekly, monthly meetings, depending on how big the core team is, right? And I would say that, there's probably a lot of conversations that you're not privy to in these core team meetings, again, depending on the core team. But you can very easily go to the issues repo, and there should be plenty of things marked like good first issue, looking for help, et cetera, et cetera. So before you start working on something as well, right, before you start trying to solve a problem, also make sure to double check by commenting and saying, hey, can I take this? Because somebody might be working on it and not have tagged something. And, once you hear back, then go ahead and start contributing. Again, you don't want to waste your time, right? Like, you want to be valuable and you want to spend your time wisely, because time is something that is a very precious commodity. So another thing that I still I say this all the time because it's needed to be said and everybody says it. And I don't know why people think like documentation and helping with documentation is like, oh, whatever, that's not hard enough, right? Let me tell you, so many people that you probably look up to within the open source community who are like, oh man, this person like is on Google Chrome and they're the most amazing people ever and blah, 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 blah. If you go back to their origin story, a lot of them are going to say, well, I started off with helping with the docs. Documentation always needs help. If you ask almost any maintainer of any project, they'll say, well, we could always use help with the docs, right? Especially if you're an active user of a project and using that documentation actively, you're going to find holes. I mean, I was just in the Node.js repo the other day and I was like, oh man, I just wish I had some time to like submit some PRs and fix some things. Unfortunately, I was limited on time, right? But if you use the documentation actively, you can find things like, oh, there's missing live examples. Oh, there's missing links. Oh, the wording is messed up. Oh, there's better explanations I can add in here, right? Help with the documentation. It will always be useful. And honestly, Ben Lesh, one of my friends, he created RxJS 5, and he's like, when you're trying to get into open source, definitely think about all the things that people don't like to do. And if you do that for them in open source projects, you're going to be very valued. So again, documentation, reviewing PRs. You don't need to be senior to review PRs, but doing that is really, really, really helpful, right? Helping with issues and recreate them to make them easily, more easily solvable. Like all those things, again, are very easy to do and work that, again, sometimes people just don't have. The last thing you want to do is make sure you're educating and sharing your experience. Again, this is way more important in the aspirational space versus the functional space. I think the best thing about this is everybody thinks about like open source as, oh, I need to create the next state management library or the next framework or the next this. But like just educating and sharing your experience and writing blog posts about what you love, how to use certain features, what are the upcoming features, what challenges did you run into when implementing a certain technology? share those with the community, right? Like you don't have to be like a hardcore technical contributor to be amazing in open source, right? If we look at some people like Deborah Carrata, for example, everybody knows Deborah Carrata. She's amazing. But, why is she so well known and like just so amazing in our community? It's because of the education that she provides us, right? So definitely think about that. And again, share your stories. It doesn't matter if somebody's already written the same blog post, because the way you write it is going to help somebody else. So the last thing I want to talk about is just some do's and don'ts as well, right? Within open source. So we'll go to the do's first. Number one is just have compassion. Make sure that you remember that most maintainers are working for free on nights and weekends. So that goes to me saying, treat maintainers like people. They're just as human. Sometimes they're only single threaded, which is okay. They can only handle so many things at one time. And if you treat them like crap, they're not going to care about you. Also, make sure you're professional. It's true that, maybe in open source, you're like not in a job that you get paid for, right? Where you're kind of required to be professional, but everybody is expecting you to be professional in open source, right? There's code of conduct and things like that for a reason. And people like people who respect each other, right? The other thing is assume the best of intentions. Like every code base started from somewhere. So if you go into a project and you're like, what is going on with this? How could somebody write this? What are they doing? Or insulting the code that was written. Nobody's going to give you the time of day. Nobody cares. Always assume the best of intentions when approaching things, because it's a tireless and often thankless job to keep everyone happy. And again, I mentioned the code of conduct, but make sure you're treating people as you would like to be treated. Make sure you're always abiding by a code of conduct that a project has. And again, if a project doesn't have one, generally follow a good code of conduct. Now for the don'ts. Don't act or be entitled. This comes with the idea of, again, of being patient. Don't think that you're a maintainer's biggest priority. You're probably not. Everybody has full-time jobs, and then full-time jobs in open source, and then kids, and then a life, and a million other things. Definitely follow up. I don't think people follow up enough. They're just like, oh, I sent this email and nobody responded, so I'm going to ignore it. No, follow up with people, but just don't email or Twitter DM about an issue 10 times a day, right? Just do it within reason. Don't be annoying. And then also don't complain, right? Like everyone is trying their best. And again, a lot of times we look at something and maybe we don't understand why a technical decision was made. Everyone has complaints about everything. There's always room for improvement, right? But you weren't there when those technical decisions were made. So you might not understand why those things needed to happen, right? Also, people will tell you complaining about something you're getting for free isn't the nicest way to approach it, and go use a different library. So again, just, make sure you're being nice out there. So we learned a few things today. Again, my journey, I hope my journey, and, I'm not going to say it was easy, but it was pretty easy. I mean, it wasn't rocket science, right? Like I didn't invent the internet or anything, right? But hopefully my journey inspired you a little bit to realize that you can do it too. Hopefully now you kind of can look at maybe why you're thinking about getting into open source, and it inspires you to find ways to do so in ways that hopefully are constructive and can make you successful. And then, of course, the do's and don'ts of just, making sure you're nice generally. I wanted to mention again, this is how I make friends. So we are looking for senior software engineers and engineering managers. So come hang out with us. And hope you all enjoyed my talk.